Sources of cause of death information. So far we've covered the importance of cause of death systems and also how we measure mortality. Here, we will review how we obtain cause of death information. The most relevant way of getting cause of death information that is used in high-income countries is called civil registration. In Canada or in Japan or in the United States, most deaths occur in institutions, in facilities, and they have a death certificate which is required by law for all deaths. And from that, the physicians typically put in the underlying cause of death, which is the main condition that contributed to that death. So this system, civil registration with medical certification, is the norm in high-income countries and is the ideal for most low and middle-income countries. However, the problem is that full medical registration or civil registration of deaths with medical certification can take several decades to implement. As recently as 1975, in rural poor parts of Louisiana, there were still men dying, so their death was registered, but their causes were not known, simply because they did not have access to medical care. It takes 100 years sometimes to get all of these systems to work well to obtain causes of death, and mostly it relies on more and more people dying in hospitals versus dying at home. Now, that's not the reality in most low and middle income countries. Alternative systems are needed, and the most important one of them is to get a random sample of all of the deaths at home and in hospital. It's not sufficient simply to rely on hospital deaths because people who die in hospital are very different than people who die in their homes. They have different diseases, there's differences in education, and other important distinctions between hospital deaths and home deaths. So you need a random sample to really understand what's happening at the population. One important innovation that's been used in India and in China and other settings is called sample registrations. Now, what these do is follow a set of households, a random set of households, over a time period and collect data on deaths and causes of death regularly from the enrolled households. And what this does is enables the determination of accurate mortality rates in the population, because you have a numerator, deaths, and you have a denominator, which is the living population. But it also then enables good information on causes of death in that population. But there are other possible systems, one of which is called a post-census mortality survey. Almost every country in the world conducts a census every 10 years in which they count all of the living people and basic characteristics of all of the living people. One of the innovations that's been done is simply to ask during that survey if there's been a death in the last year or so, and then later send a team to investigate what the causes of death were through verbal autopsies. So this uses the census as a sample frame to capture a census of the dead, and then randomly selects some of those houses and deaths to interview for the cause of death. A very successful system has been put in place in Mozambique, where they covered about 12,000 deaths nationally representative, drawn from the preceding census in 2010. So let's turn back to the sample registration system example, and we'll do so by reviewing in detail the Million Death Study in India. The Million Death Study shows that it is possible to obtain at low cost, very high quality data on the causes of death. And this is relevant not just in India, but in other settings.